Hello there. It is good to be back, y'all. It is Wednesday, September 12th, 2018, and this is the A-Side Live Chat Podcast, or the S&M Podcast for all y'all weirdos out there. My name is Sean Oshadi, and as always, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It was a long week in Dallas, a really fun week. I think I got sick from some woman on the plane. She was hacking up a lung. I've been feeling like crap ever since, but who cares? I couldn't wait to get back, spend my Wednesday morning with all you guys. And as always, joining me today is my good friend, the hardest working man in the entire game. He is coming at you live from the MMA Fighting Sweatbox in Los Angeles, Mr. Mark Raimondi. How is everything going today, Mark?
Everything is great. How are you feeling, sir? I know you've been struggling with some illness.
I am feeling like complete and utter trash. I can't hear out of this ear. My whole face, my whole head is stuffed up. But whatever, man. Who cares, right? We're just going to power through that. Fake some energy. Fake it till you make it. Something like that. That's a thing.
I recommend many drugs for what you're going through.
What type of drugs would you like to recommend to me?
All of them.
All right. I'll be on all of the drugs next time, and I think it'll be an interesting show.
It'll be great. I can't believe it's September already. It's crazy to me that we're already in mid-September, and it's kind of the calm before the storm. We just finished UFC 228, and the rest of the year is going to be bananas. It was just announced, I guess, Brett Okamoto from ESPN just tweeted that the first, we've been waiting for this. The first breaking news, the first Khabib McGregor press conference coming up next Thursday, a week from tomorrow in New York at Radio City Music Hall. I am going to be there already. I'm already going to be in New York next week. How about that? Coincidence, but there it is. The first press conference for perhaps the biggest fight in UFC history is now coming up next week. This is the calm before the storm. I'm telling you, 2018 gets completely insane after this week.
Coincidence? I think not. I think they knew you were going to be in New York, and they're like, well, Mark's going to be here. We got to finally get this going with the big man here.
We just got an email. The UFC just sent out the press to the press about the email about the UFC 229 press conference. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, September 30th at Radio City Music Hall with Khabib Nurmagomedov, with Conor McGregor, with Dana White. There it is. And it seems like from what the press release says, it's going to be closed to the public. So only media members will be there.
Which is an interesting caveat. That's an interesting caveat.
It is interesting, and I wonder why they did it that way. But of course, I'm sure there will be a stream of the event for everyone. Of course, we'll have videos of the press conference, and we'll have full coverage as always. But only open to the press, no public at that press conference. But it's the first one. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be huge. The first time those guys are in the same room since April. So it's going to be very hectic. And I wonder if part of the thinking is security reasons. I wonder if part of the thinking is let's make sure we have just the minimum amount of people that we can have in this building, because start letting the public in, and who knows who's going to show up. You know what I mean? Will there be some people from Ireland in there? It could get almost a little bit too rowdy. And New York is already a pretty rowdy place.
I embrace the rowdiness. Come on, let's get rowdy.
Yeah, of course. I totally agree. And there's nothing better than a hostile crowd and that feeling that you don't know what's going to happen. It's one of the reasons why that first Khabib Nate Diaz press conference was so damn good. The first Conor. I'm getting a little excited. The first McGregor Diaz press conference was so good because it felt like anything could happen, that it could blow off at any moment. But the priority here is getting those guys to the fight. Let's get them to the fight. Let's get them in Las Vegas. Let's get them into the octagon for UFC 229 on October 6th, and let's make that fight happen. But there it is, the first press conference next week, next Thursday. It should be completely bonkers.
Awesome, man! I cannot wait for that. I'm excited. It's crazy to me that in 3 weeks we're gonna be in Las Vegas for this. Like, it doesn't feel.
It's 3 weeks away.
3 weeks, man.
What?
3 weeks. Me and you, we're gonna be killing that in Las Vegas.
3 weeks? I actually did not know it was that close. It's completely insane.
It's gonna be bonkers. We're gonna have a whole team there. We're gonna have a big squad out there. We're gonna have a lot going on. It's gonna be a lot of fun stuff.
Rolling deep. Rolling deep, as the kids.
Rolling real deep for that. But
Do the
hey,
kids still say that?
I don't know what the kids say anymore. I'm like about to turn 30. Like I'm so out of touch. Whatever.
You're so old, Sean. So old.
Well, hey, let's not waste any more time. Thanks again for joining us on this fine Wednesday, guys. Big show today. Tons to discuss. UFC 228, that's behind us. Fallout from that really created plenty of intrigue. I mean, Tyron Woodley, he's still the welterweight champion. He pulls off really just a flawless victory over Darren Till. What's next for him? Where does he rank on the all-time great welterweight list? Also, I mean, UFC Moscow is this weekend. Fabricio Verdum is suspended. Michael Chiesa is suing Conor McGregor. There's a ton going on. All of that and more on today's program. But as always, this is your show, guys. This is your show. So we will talk about whatever you want us to talk about. You can ask us a question on the MMA Fighting page below. Any question that gets 3 recommendations, that will turn green. Those will get priority. Or you can ask us a question on Twitter using the hashtag the A-Side or Chat Rappers. A replay of this podcast is going up immediately following the show on YouTube. Audio-only version, podcast version, that's going to be up on SoundCloud. And we are in the works, I promise you. I know we say it every week, but iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, that is coming this month. We just had a meeting about it yesterday. It should be coming soon. So in the meantime, we'll keep you guys posted on that. But let's dive into some questions, Mark. Let's do this. And first up, coming from the MMA Fighting page, loyal listener Matt the Donk, who wants to know Fabricio Verdum's legacy. What is Verdum's legacy in the sport? Now that USADA has given him a 2-year suspension for steroids, and he's already 41 years old, I think it is fair to start that discussion. I think you could make the argument he's a first ballot Hall of Famer with wins over Overeem, Fedor, Hunt, Kane, but his record does have blemishes. So what say you?
Of course, Fabricio Verdum is one of the best heavyweights of all time. I didn't even think that was a discussion. To me, that's pretty obvious. There was a time when he was the UFC champion after beating beating Cain Velasquez and of course losing to Stipe Miocic, that people were even talking about him possibly being the best heavyweight of all time. Had he gotten a few more wins as the UFC champion, a few more title defenses, you could have made a very good case for Fabricio Verdum being the best heavyweight in the history of MMA, and I still think he's on that list. Look, we've had these discussions before about USADA and these drug test failures, and I don't love to take away from fighters after they fail a drug test as far as their legacy goes, because we just don't know enough about this stuff. Fabricio Verdum failed the drug test. He's 41 years old. Does that take away everything that he accomplished in the last decade plus in MMA? Plus. I mean, he's been around for a long time. He's defeated some of the best heavyweights ever. Does that take away? To me, it does not. To me, it maybe tarnishes his legacy a bit, but I don't think it knocks him off the pedestal of being one of the best heavyweights ever. I still think he's up there. The win against Fedor Emelianenko, breaking Emelianenko's great streak, is memorable. It's one of the greatest moments in MMA history for some, and his resume, I think, stands up. I still think Verdum is up there. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think if we start talking about, well, if you fail a drug test, you can no longer be considered one of the greatest ever, then that's a long line of fighters who we can't consider the greatest. John Jones, Anderson Silva. I don't put a bunch of stock into it. Does it tarnish his legacy? Sure, a little bit, but I still think Verdum is one of the best of all time at heavyweight.
So I'll jump in on the last thing you said, that a drug test shouldn't tarnish your chances for the GOAT conversation. I disagree with that just on the premise of the GOAT conversation. When it comes to that actual conversation, I feel like you can't fail drug tests. So in my mind, whenever we talk about the GOAT, John Jones and those guys, those are probably out of them. But that's not what we're talking about with Fabricio, right? And so for me, I mean, I come from the world of basketball. That was my initial sport that I loved more than anything. And in basketball, we have these kind of conversations all the time of like, who are the top 5 point guards of all time? Who are the 10 best players of ever? Top 5 centers, that type of thing. So I just love, that's like how my brain works. So in my mind, Fabricio Verdum's legacy starts that he is, like you said, an all-time great heavyweight. In my mind, I think he's in the top 5. He's a top 5 heavyweight of all time. And like you said, there was really in the midst of his career-defining run, we were talking him as the potential number 1. Like from that 2012 to 2016 stretch, where he beat Roy Nelson, Big Nog, Travis Brown, when that meant something, and then KO'd Mark Hunt, and then subbed Cain Velasquez. Like that is as good of a. He had a win over Mike Russo in there and as well, and so that is as good as a 6-fight run as you could find at heavyweight. And even right before that, I mean, his last 2 wins right before that streak, that was in Strikeforce, and that's Bigfoot Silva again when that really meant something. And then his legendary night against Fedor, and I'll never ever forget the Fedor night. Like that thing is burned in my head because I was watching that from my buddy's house back in college. I was just a fan back then. And I remember so clearly like hyping this Russian killer up to all of my buddies who could not have given a shit about MMA and just telling them like, oh man, look at this. Look out for this guy. This is going to be really exciting tonight. You're going to see this guy crush this former UFC guy. Fedor is one of the greatest, just all of this. And here he comes out looking like someone's dad and gets subbed in like 69 seconds. And everyone's looking at me like I'm an idiot. I'm freaking out. And like no one can appreciate the history and the ridiculousness that just happened in front of me. Like I need new friends or something, but it made me look really stupid. But it was just one of the craziest nights, man. So I go back to, I think he's a top 5, like you said, all-timer, top 5, first ballot Hall of Famer. The strength of schedule really helps him. I mean, the names he beat are really a who's who of heavyweight history. His longevity, that is a big thing for me. Even well into like his 16th year in the sport this year, he still was like a relevant world-class contender at this weight class. And also, I mean, he's just one of the top 2, top 3 best heavyweight grapplers I think we've ever seen. Like I would throw him along with Big Nog and Frank Mir in some order up in there and up in that mix. So I think that's kind of where he's going to stand. Although I will say to finish this, I because of the way heavyweight works, I mean, he'll be 43 when this suspension's over. I don't think this is the end all the way. I could see 1 of 2 options. One where he keeps going and he waits it out because heavyweights can fight older. Or 2, I mean, I wouldn't be stunned if he works towards getting a release from the UFC and then we see him fighting in Chechnya or Russia somewhere over the next year. I mean, you know, he has ties with Chechen dictator / genuinely terrible person, Ramzan Kadyrov. So I could see something like that happening.
I just want to touch on, and I do agree with most of what you said, but I wanted to touch on something that you said in the beginning of that little rant. John, you can't consider Jon Jones the greatest of all time because he failed a couple of drug tests. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you failed 2 drug tests at this point. You're out of the conversation, man. Like if give me Daniel Cormier on steroids for his entire career. Let me see what that looks like. Like I have no idea.
All right. So you're saying that you cannot consider Jon Jones, despite what he accomplished before ever failing a drug test, you cannot consider that man the greatest of all time? I mean, first of all, the first drug test was a contaminated supplement. He was able to prove that. The second one, we don't even know what's going on. Maybe we'll talk about that later, but we don't even know what the resolution is on the second drug test. So the first one was a contaminated supplement. So he's out of the conversation. I mean, the guy guy in cage is the best of all time. I don't think it's indisputable. So I
agree that skills wise, he's the best of all time. But in my mind, GSP is the best of all time because he didn't fail the drug test. That's just how you get discounted from the conversation if you fail a drug test. And I'm sorry that you disagree with that. But again, give me Demetrius Johnson on steroids. Let me see what that looks like. Like that's an advantage, regardless of whether you like it or not.
Okay, that's fine. I respectfully disagree. I still think that, and I get it. I know there's a case to be made for George St. Pierre, but I still feel like, again, I can't take that away. I can't take away what Jon Jones has done based upon the drug test failures. There are things that have been taken away already from him, and he's been punished, and he lost that last win against Daniel Cormier. But how about all those other wins that were not taken away? How about all that he's done in the sport? Look, the guy he's his own worst enemy in many ways, but I can't take that away from him. I still think he's the best.
There's two things, right? Because like he wasn't competing in an area with strict drug testing when it comes to the sport for a long time.
But nobody
was. I was going to get to that. But also, I mean, we're acting as though his career is done. It's not. If he comes back and has another 6 years or 7 years of dominance under USADA, it's a different conversation. I can re-enter him into that conversation at that point. But at this current moment, he is out of that conversation for me, just with what all the stuff we've dealt with him for.
All right. I mean, you're wrong, but it's fine. We'll
Okay.
we'll move on. Flyweight title. Who should Valentina? This is from Dizzy Dwarf, a valued reader and consumer of the A side. Who should Valentina fight for the vacant flyweight title? Any chance Joanna moves up to challenge her?
So I know the sexy answer here, the one that people want to hear is Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
The sexy answer?
Just in terms of like that's that's a really appealing matchup, man. Like that would be okay. Get out of here with that. Come on. But like there's history there. They've obviously fought 3 times in Muay Thai.
Look, if you want to call Joanna Jędrzejczyk sexy,
you gotta get on track, sir. You're getting going off the rails.
Let me have some coffee.
But yeah, I mean, I know there's history there. Valentina's beat her 3 times in Muay Thai. That I would love that fight, but it just doesn't feel like Joanna's ready for that. She really seems dead set on trying to get this 115-pound title back before she goes to 125. So in my mind, it's probably Sijara Eubanks. That would be where I would turn as the second option. I mean, she should have gotten the title shot against Nico initially. She missed weight. Obviously, that's a thing. How many weeks go by where we continually have to talk about the weight? But it at least gets the division going again. She feels like the rightful challenger. And it felt like UFC 228 was intended to be a coronation of sorts for Valentina. So at least this still brings Valentina to the table. And again, Sijara Eubanks is as worthy of a contender as anybody, I think.
Yeah, I think.
I will just add, I really want to see Nico fight Valentina Shevchenko's sister now. That is the matchup for me now. I really want to see that.
You know what? I still want to see Montano fight Shevchenko. To me, actually, I want to see that fight more now than I did 5 days ago. I think that fight. I still think that's a very interesting fight, especially now with that rivalry. There is some real bad blood there. Anyway, I think I agree with you. I think Sijara Eubanks is probably the next in line at flyweight if Jędrzejczyk doesn't move up. You saw the women's flyweight division get pretty upset when our buddy Ariel Helwani tweeted last week that he wants to see Joanna move up and fight Shevchenko. And I think a lot of people do want to see that fight. There's a history there between Shevchenko and Jędrzejczyk. But if Jędrzejczyk is concentrating on 115, it should probably go to Eubanks next. What is interesting to watch in this division, Sean, is that 5 of the best women's 125ers in the world come from 2 training camps. At Mark Henry and Ricardo Almeida have Sijara Eubanks and Caitlin Chikagian, and John Wood over at Syndicate MMA has Joanne Calderwood, Roxanne Modafferi, and Jessica Rose Clark. So there's going to be some interesting discussions going on in the next few years about who's going to fight whom in that division. Something to watch out for. But as it stands right now, it's probably Eubanks' fight.
Yeah, I agree with you. And let's use this question to segue a little bit. We'll jump ahead. We'll revisit the questions behind it. But a little bit farther down the page, D Iceman 19 asks, the Nico Montano issue. Was it fair to strip her of her belt? Should she remain in the title picture, or should the UFC move on from her? And does her social media outrage against her bosses put her in any uncompromising situation going forward? Great show, guys. And we appreciate that last part. So, Mark, this is obvious segue from what we were just talking about. Nico Montano and her situation. It all happened very suddenly, basically in a span of 24 hours. She lost her title. What were your thoughts in general, and what are your takeaways? Was it handled correctly?
I have a lot of thoughts about this, and it's just a super unfortunate situation, and it's a situation that didn't just start on Friday on weigh-in day. This is something that has been, I guess, building for a bit. It's something that you need to kind of look at the whole picture and not at the situation in just a vacuum of what happened on Friday. So Nico Montano spoke with Luke Thomas on the MMA Hour on Monday, and basically what she has said, and it's something that she's also been saying even before Monday, is that she didn't really want to come back in September. She was having health issues pretty much the entire year. She had a tonsillectomy. She had a broken foot. She was still kind of recovering from 4 weight cuts to 125 last year, 3 on the Ultimate Fighter in a very short amount of time, and the 1 in December for the title fight. So all those things compounded made for a very tough year for her. And she said that she kind of knew that if she were to fight in September, weight would be a major issue for her, and it ended up being. But she felt like if she didn't take that fight in September with Shevchenko, that the UFC might strip her of the belt, and she was already taking a bunch of heat from fans online, spurred somewhat by Shevchenko kind of calling for the fight over and over again. The fight was, they initially offered it in July. She said, Montano said she couldn't do it in July, got moved to September. Montano said, I probably would not be healthy until October or November to make the weight cut. Now, let's forget the fact that it's just ridiculous that you have to be healthy to make a weight cut. That shouldn't even be a discussion, but that's just where we are in the sport, where the weight cut is actually the hard part. Never mind that for now. This is one of those situations that we've been talking about, Sean, where the UFC has their schedule planned out. They have slots to fill, and they have to fill them with title fights for the most part. This is the same thing that happened kind of with Colby Covington, where Woodley was ready to fight in September. He's ready to fight at UFC 228. Covington was the interim champion. Should have been his fight. He can't fight in September. Well, they strip him of the interim title, and they move on with Woodley against Darren Till. So Montano was probably feeling the pressure to fight in September, and now this whole thing happens. So it's just unfortunate. Now, I think that if you're unable to make the weight, and you're the champion, and she was not able to make the weight, as we saw, I don't have a problem with them stripping her of the title. But we also have to look at the whole picture, not just what happened on Friday. And also the way that she found out about being stripped of the title, listening to a Dana White, interview on her phone on Instagram.
So typical.
That sucks. That really sucks. That's unfortunate. So I think that if we're looking at it in a vacuum, yes, the UFC has a right to strip someone of the title who cannot make weight. If you can't make weight in your division, then you can't be the champion in that division. That's just basic. But I also understand Montano's perspective that this is something that started a long time ago. This is months and a year in the making, where she probably should not have tried to fight in September anyway. But because of the way that the UFC is structured right now, where there is pressure for fighters to fight on a certain date, she kind of fell victim to that. And it's almost everyone's fault in a sense that it happened the way it did. And now we're left with another situation where there's a vacant title. And this is just what keeps happening in the UFC.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, man. Like we went to Dallas and we came away with one less UFC champion than we came there with. Like and no one was surprised. And I think that says something about the state of the sport in general, where we just kind of accept this, move on, and it's news for like an hour, and then people just move on. But like you said, I mean, she checked in Tuesday. She was telling her own Luke Thomas that she checked in Tuesday at 144 pounds, which is about, I think, 15% above the weight class, something like that. That's, like you said, that's a red flag immediately. So the situation just makes sense if you take a step back and remove all the names and like everything. Like, if you just took a step back and broke it down from the facts that the champion failed to make weight, that this wasn't like a Max Holloway situation where there were other issues at play or people were concerned for someone's health in terms of like mentally, whether someone was there. Simply put, the champion was unable to complete her weight cut and make weight. Thus, she failed in her obligation. So all things aside, I mean, it is a really crappy, the whole situation. And it seems like it has been a really difficult year for Nico. So I do feel bad for her in that sense. But stripping her was the right move. Like, this division really needs to get going. That title was won in December and nothing has happened with it since. And we've just kind of had these false starts over and over and over again. So ultimately, the champion was not able to complete her obligations to make weight. Stripping her was the right move. But man, can't you just like call somebody first before you let the rest of the world know? Like, finding out from Instagram, this is so typical, man. It is so ridiculous and so typical that how many times have we heard fighters tell us that they found out career-changing news from social media? Like that, I can't even imagine what that would be like if I was just scrolling through Twitter and it's just like, oh, Sean Al-Shadi's been fired from MMA fighting. That would have been good to know. Like, what is this, man? It's so silly.
All right, let's move on now to Gitters from the MMA fighting comments. Mairbek Taisimov. I don't think you skipped on that. I did, and there is a method to my madness. I will get back to that later in the promo segment.
Oh no, we need to talk about it before then, but okay.
All right, fine. Mairbek Taisimov. Hi, hey guys, wondering what you think of Mairbek Taisimov's situation. I find it one of the most heartbreaking in MMA. This guy is a world-class talent, and this situation I feel does not get enough exposure. Do you agree? Do you think he will ever get a visa? And lastly, what do you think of this fight with Desmond Green in Moscow? Also, give PT, the MMA Fighting Employee, the Mugs Trophy for interviewing and writing a great article about a situation. Thanks, guys, and keep up the good work. Love the chat. PT Carroll is the man, by the way. If you guys are not following him on Twitter, you're missing out. He's doing a fantastic job covering the European scene for MMAfighting.com and beyond. He's really been awesome. Sean, what do you think of Tyson not being able to get a visa to the U.S.? How much is that hurting him? And what is this? What is the deal with this?
You know, it really is unfortunate, man. Like if you look at lightweight is such a deep division, but if you look at Taisumav's resume, man, like he is 6-1 in the UFC. The last 5 of those are just knockouts, and all of them have been varying degrees of just very, very brutal. It sucks, man. It really does suck. I mean, he's been in the UFC, like I said, 5 years at this point. You'd like to see him be able to make progression, but he really feels like he has been slowed down by this visa situation. There's not much more to say to it, but it's very unfortunate. And this guy, at some point, you know, he's 30 years old now. It feels like we're missing the best years of Taisumov just because he can't fight in the United States. So he's kind of getting relegated to these fight night cards where he's fighting in, you know, Zagreb or Berlin or Rotterdam or somewhere. Like he can't get on the big pay-per-view cards and really get that showcase or like a big UFC on Fox card or anything like that, because those are always stateside or in North America in general. So it is unfortunate. I will say though the matchup against Desmond Green is very bizarre matchmaking, just in terms of I guess the stories behind those guys, because Desmond Green just was in an accident where 2 people were killed. So there is like a lot of just like dark stuff generally in that matchup. But yeah, I don't know. It's an unfortunate situation all around.
Yeah, weird fight, and I'm surprised that Desmond Green is still fighting this weekend in Moscow, because, as you said, 3 weeks ago he was involved. It was his SUV that kind of went off course, which ignited a multi-car accident that 2 people ultimately died in, and he's under investigation by the Florida Highway Patrol right now, and that investigation has not come back yet. So it's just weird that he's still fighting. Weird that he even wants to fight. I mean, I can't imagine he's in the right headspace. I mean, 2 people just died. Very strange, very, very odd, kind of a story that's not getting talked about too much, but that's a weird one. As far as Taisumov goes, where's Dana White? Call up your buddy Donald J. Trump and be like, look, I got this great fighter. Could be a title contender. Can't get a visa. What can we do? How can we make this happen? Donald, buddy, Donnie. That's all Dana White's got to do, right? He just calls up Donald Trump. You know, they're on speed dial. They're buds. Just show up to the White House, knock on the front door, you know, ring the bell. Is there a bell at the White House? I don't know. But yeah, it shouldn't be that hard to get Tyson off a visa. If they really want to get Tyson off a visa, it shouldn't be all that difficult to do it because of the relationship that Dana White has with the Prez, right? I mean, it seems that way.
It's as simple as that, man. Like he is a very, very, very violent man. Like we are missing out by him not
Donald Trump or Taisumov.
Like
Okay.
Jesus, we're missing out. We're missing out on him not being able to compete in like a full capacity, like really being handicapped by this. Like it is unfortunate.
I mean, also the fact that most people don't even know who he is. I mean, if more fans were exposed to Meyerbeck, I think he would be even a bigger deal. It sucks. I mean, I don't know the situation with the visa. It's so hard to tell why people get visas and they don't get visas. Who knows? But
yeah,
it would be nice for him and for his career and also for for the division to have him eligible to fight in the United States.
Yeah. Well, hey man, let's move on. Let's go to a question from Nima SBM, because I need to talk about this. Revisiting my post from last week, UFC 230 main event. He writes, Sean mentioned that most of the options presented to him as better options than Nate versus Dustin for the main event have so many conditions attached to them, and all of them come with a whole bunch of if this or if that. Well, I guess one of those conditions about one of the fights Mark was talking about, Woodley Covington, is clear now. Woodley did win and took literally no damage. However, looking at the previous history of UFC championship fights, when was the last time a champion defended his or her belt twice in 2 months? That aside, is Tyron Woodley versus Covington going to do UFC 205 or 217 numbers? Maybe it is too much of an expectation to given that those cards feature 3 title fights, including GSP and Conor. But even if they aim for the 500K, 600K range for pay-per-views, do you think Tyron Colby does the job? So a couple things right off the bat, because you got so damn dumb lucky with this. We have been arguing about this for weeks and weeks and you got so stupidly lucky that like this weird path that you needed to happen ended up happening. So we're never going to get an actual answer to this conversation that I would have won had any normal circumstance happen and maybe Darren Hill hit Tyron Woodley once with a significant strike in the damn fight. But we'll get to that. To answer one part of that question, I was looking it up, and I think the shortest turnaround I can find, or at least in very brief research, for a champion was Ronda Rousey when she turned around after Miesha Tate and then defended against Sarah McMahon. That was like 56 days back in 2013-14. So that would be comparable to this. But I mean, back to the question at hand. Woodley literally took no damage. I mean, he didn't get hit by a single significant strike. No one was predicting that, not even you. So now it appears that's the next best option. Even if he wouldn't want to normally to take this kind of turnaround, Tyron's really a historian. Like, he's a student of the game. Headlining a place like MSG, that has to be like a bucket list type of thing for him. Also, I mean, he just came off a crazy long layoff, so I'm sure he wouldn't mind the extra paycheck, like going into the holidays right now. And also, I will say, I think the shorter lead up to the Covington fight, the better for his own personal sanity, just because I expect that will get very ugly very quickly. So in my mind, I know they're still holding out hope for John Jones to get that spot, but that's the fight, right? Like, that's probably the main event of 230 right now.
It should be probably, right? But I don't know if it will be. I really don't. To me, that's the fight to make. I think Woodley should be the guy in that main event. And I tweeted the other night after the dominant win over Darren Till, could it be GSP? Is there any way the UFC can make Woodley versus GSP happen at MSG in, 7 weeks? 7 weeks from now? I mean, that seems unlikely. But that would be pretty cool. That would be a good main event. That would be a great main event. That would be the kind of main event they're looking for.
That would be very cool. That would be, especially with where Tyron is right now in his career, that would be amazing to see that.
It would be a great story because it would be the welterweight GOAT challenging against the current welterweight king, who is on a run that you can make the case that right now that Tyron Woodley is the most accomplished champion in the UFC right now.
Yeah.
Daniel Cormier has held the light heavyweight title longer, and he is the champ, of course, but he did have the fight against Jones that he lost, and he got overturned to no contest. All respect to DC, but Woodley can make a case for being the most decorated current champion, and he's the second most tenured current champion.
Also, he could make a case, and again, this goes back to what I was saying with Verdum, where I like to think of things in this aspect, but you could make a case that he's the second best welterweight ever right now. Like, there is a very compelling resume for him to at least be in that top 3 welterweights of all time discussion now. Like, that certainly him versus GSP would be tremendous.
Oh yeah, it would be a huge deal. But I still think there is a possibility that we see John Jones headline UFC 230. I still think there is a window open, a crack in the window open for that to happen.
Fast closing, but it is open.
It is. I mean, we're getting real close now to that. I mean, the on sale is next week. They're putting tickets on sale next week for that fight, and I imagine they will want and try and have to have something done as far as a main event for UFC 230 done by next week. I imagine they'll probably announce it at the press conference for Khabib and McGregor. Now, what that fight is, I don't know. I still think it could be Jones. I don't know who the opponent would be. It's not going to be Daniel Cormier. I would bet a lot of money that it won't be Cormier because we're 7 weeks out. Unless DC has secretly been dieting down and training and getting ready.
He hasn't been dieting. I saw him in Dallas. He was very huge.
All right, let's be respectful to the champ here.
Oh, come on. He's heavyweight. He was just big. Like, he's a big muscly dude right now.
Daniel is a big man. He needs a little bit to get down to 205. So unless he has been dieting, and you're saying that that's unlikely, it probably won't be Jones DC3 at MSG. Could it be? I saw a little rumor from Middle Easy a few minutes before we went on the air that Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson is in talks. They said a title fight. I'm not sure if that would be an interim title or what it would be, but perhaps that could be the UFC 230 main event. I hadn't really thought about that.
That would be nice.
I don't know, but I still think, and I do believe that the reason why we don't have a UFC 230 main event yet is because I think the UFC is waiting for USADA to figure this whole thing out with Jon Jones.
I agree with you. I think, like you said, there's a tiny crack still open for that, and it like that seems like the answer that everyone's just waiting on at this point. Is this possible for Jon Jones? Which is, I mean, we talk about Fabricio Verdum's USADA thing. It took a third of the time that Jon Jones's has been going on at this point. Like, there is so much weirdness going on with that, but I will say, I if it isn't Jon, I think it's probably going to end up being Tyron versus Covington. And I like that fight a lot. Like, I noticed something in Dallas when I was just covering that event, and generally the atmosphere around Tyron. It seems to be that the fan base may be coming around to Tyron now in a way that they weren't before. Like, there was a big fight feel in the American Airlines Center by the time Saturday came. He was received really well all week by the crowd. He was booed occasionally, but not nearly as much as I expected. And I'm really curious to see how well 228 did on pay-per-view, because it was a great card. It was probably my favorite card of the year, just in terms of action and how it was delivered. And you liked it beforehand too. You were even saying that. But like I talked about last week, it wasn't full of stars. And Tyron has already kind of established himself as this baseline 300K type of champion. So I'm curious if he can hit that number again, despite his past two fights and how people felt going into it. But I really do feel like this past weekend could be like a turning point for him. Like, that impressive performance, that was the old Tyron Woodley. That really reminded people of, like, oh, when he doesn't fight a Stephen Thompson or a Damian Maia, like these weird specialists where he has to be on guard at all possible moments. Like, there are a few people who have more exciting fights than Tyron, especially just if you go back. Like, he almost always has an exciting fight if his opponent allows it. And now it feels like people are, like I said, coming back around on him. Dean Thomas this week on the MMA Hour spoke to our Luke Thomas and Thomas to Thomas, and his assessment to fans, that fans were like upset with Tyron going into that fight rather than disliking him. That seemed to ring true in a weird way. Like, I kind of understood where he's coming from. And I think the lead up to this Covington fight, he will be the baby face in every sense of the word. Like, I think a large portion of the fan base after that Till fight are going to really be rooting very, very heavily for Tyron to do bad things to Colby Covington, especially because, like I said, that lead up is going to get ugly quick and go to places probably that are very uncomfortable. By the time fight week comes, it could be like an actual big fight. Like, it could be actually like a genuine, maybe not like a huge, DC Jones Connor type of fight, but like an actual big fight. And I feel like that could happen, especially with the place we are in the world as a country, and again, the topics that may come up.
I agree. And people forget that Woodley has 6 finishes and 9 UFC wins. People only remember what you kind of did most recently. They forget the knockout, the huge knockouts of Robbie Lawler and Josh Koscheck, et cetera, et cetera. It's just one of those, what have you done for me lately sports. And I think Woodley coming off this big win against Darren Till gives him a ton of momentum going into whatever is next, whether it's Covington, whether it's GSP, which may be a pipe dream. But I think he is a bigger star, as you said, after UFC 228. Speaking of UFC 228, moving on to the comments section of MMA Fighting from Ben L. UFC 228 finishes. UFC 228 had 9 finishes from 13 fights. Which one were you guys most impressed by?
Man, that's a tough one. That is a really tough one. I would default to the main event just because I don't think anybody expected Tyron to not get hit by a single significant strike throughout that fight. But if I'm going to go outside of the main event, I'd say either Jessica Andrade, who I felt, especially in the moment, had to do something very, very big to make a statement, especially after Tatiana Suarez just went out there and blew the doors off Carla Esparza. That was one of the, if not the single most violent knockout, one-punch knockout I have ever seen from a 115-pounder in this entire sport. That was Mike Tyson-esque, the way she just flatlined Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I can't remember a 115-pound knockout like that. That was so brutal and visceral in the moment. Jim Miller, Diego Sanchez, that was cool. That was really cool to see them come back. I think a lot of people maybe were feeling like they were getting close to that retirement conversation. So it was cool to see them come back. But I will say the most impressive performance is one that we will talk about next. So I'll hold off on that, or at least for me.
Best finish, I mean, I have to give a shout out to Aljamain Sterling for that.
Oh yeah, there you
It's
go.
like it kind of got overshadowed because Zabit had a very similar, if not the same type of finish. We've only seen one of these Suluev stretches in UFC history before. It was Kenny Robertson a few years ago. He landed that move where it's a knee bar from the guy's back, from the opponent's back.
Like
it's an
a
incredible submission.
like a knee bar hamstring thing. Like it looks terrible.
It's
It looks,
horrible. And Cody's statements, I don't know I hope his knee's okay. I hope he's not out for an extended period of time because Sterling got Staman's back, took the leg, and just bent it the wrong way. And it looked horrendous. I mean, in some ways, it looked more brutal than the Zabit finish. It seemed like Brandon Davis was okay after that finish, but Cody Stamann did not look awesome. And again, I hope he's all right. But I thought Sterling's finish was probably the most. I probably popped the hardest for that finish because it was so unique and creative and innovative. And he almost finished with a full Nelson a few seconds before. I mean, I love this guy. He's so creative on the ground. He's fun to watch. He's fun to listen to when he talks. I enjoy Aljo, and that probably for me was the coolest one of the night. In a night of just fantastic finishes. Dave Meltzer reported earlier on MMA Fighting that the worst ratings for prelims in a year at UFC 228, they missed out on some just ridiculous stuff.
People what do you guys want? What do you people want? It's so good.
They want big names. They don't want cool submissions. They want Logan Paul. People want Logan Paul.
God damn it. I will say that is so typical MMA where you don't see we see it once in the history of the UFC and like in 2013, Kenny Robertson. Then all of a sudden you get two in one night. Like that is always how this stuff works out. It's so strange. But let's keep moving. Keep talking about UFC 228. This next question comes from Ben L, and it's one I really am looking forward to. Tatiana Suarez, man. Suarez looked unstoppable in the cage at UFC 228. Who would you match her up with next, Mark? So what were your general takeaways from Tatiana Suarez's impressive performance, and where do you want her to go from here?
She's an absolute monster. I mean, holy goodness.
Monster.
I mean, 115 pounds. Like she is just a beast, just a savage at that weight class. I don't know. I mean, people were making the Khabib Nurmagomedov comparisons, and she has embraced that because she reposted the photo of her wearing the Khabib hat, the wig that he wears. The name of that escapes me right now, but she is just, I think she's obviously a next level wrestler. There's no one in that division who can match her wrestling wise. The only person who has wrestling that would be comparable to her is Carla Esparza, and we saw what happened on Saturday. Carla is incredibly tough and durable, and Suarez just kind of dominated from bell to bell, and she finished the fight late. Just incredible. As far as what's next, and she is someone that people have been saying is a possible future champion, and I can also see that. Of course, this division is really great. It's a really fun division to watch. The top of that division is to me extremely deep. And there's a lot of great names, including Jessica Andrade, who you mentioned earlier. I think if Andrade gets the title shot, which it's hard to say she didn't earn on Saturday by knocking out Kowalkiewicz, I think that Suarez versus Jędrzejczyk is something that I would love to see. Again, if Joanna does not move up to 125 to fight Shevchenko, Suarez versus Jędrzejczyk makes a ton of sense for a few reasons. Jędrzejczyk has already beaten Gadelha, Kowalkiewicz, Andrade. We've already seen her against those fighters. How would she do against a wrestler of the capability of Tatiana Suarez? If she's able to beat Suarez, then I think you can say Joanna deserves a chance at the title again. I think you can make that case. If she can beat Suarez, okay, Joanna, you got it. You're a title challenger again. If Suarez beats Jędrzejczyk, that's a huge victory, a huge notch in the belt for her. I think that is the fight to make. I think that's a title eliminator. And you know what? I could even see that headlining, maybe the tough finale coming up in December. I can see that be a headlining fight. I think that fight is big enough and cool enough to headline an FS1 card.
I like that a lot. That's a good call, man. I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, I mean, I will say I was so damn impressed with Tatiana Suarez, man. Like I came away from Dallas. That was my first time really interacting with her. And she is like surprisingly charismatic in person. She cuts a very good promo. And also you can just like feel her confidence when you speak to her. Like just the way she exudes confidence. Almost, I think at one point during our interview, she was just like, oh no, they know what I'm going to do. They know. And it's just like that's very cool to hear. But I said on the post-fight show, like sometimes, man, in this sport, you can just tell. Like you watch somebody and you can just tell when somebody is special on their come up. And Saturday was exactly that for Tatiana, for me at least. Like it was perfect matchmaking through and through, and the way she handled it, the similarities you mentioned, the Khabib comparisons, they ring very true to me, just in one sense, having been in that arena, watched sort of close up what was going on, the existential dread that you can see just like creep over opponents' faces in the first few minutes when they realize that, oh, like this is what this is going to be like. And this isn't going to be quick. Like this is going to be a very long, drawn out process for which I have no answer and I can do nothing to stop it. And it just goes until eventually I give up. Like that, it was palpable in the first round. I mean, Carla had looked like she had a broken orbital or something. I'm sure we'll get an update on that at some point. But it was palpable in the first round. Like you could sense that, like, oh no, this is not what Carla thought was going to happen. It was just wrestling control on a different level. And it's interesting the way we look at it too, like the nuances of this sport, because I feel like ground and pound can be the most boring thing in the entire world at the hands of someone like, I don't know, like a John Fitch or something, right? Where somebody's just using a lot of top control and just really riding things out.
How dare you?
I'm just speaking the truth, man. Like it can be the most boring thing in the world to watch, but in the hands of someone like Tatiana or again, Khabib or anything, it can be the most brutal, devastating, and just like morbidly fascinating and entertaining thing in the world. You're basically just watching someone slowly die without if no referee was there. Like it is, again, the terror. Like no one's actually afraid, but just the actual like preternatural like terror that someone can like not control. You can see that creep on their face in the way that like maybe a Michael Johnson in the Michael Johnson Khabib fight or that Carla Tatiana fight. Like it is very crazy and morbid again to watch in person. And I really do believe like her wrestling might be a stylistic kryptonite for the rest of the division, because the rest of the division that is a division lacking in really crazy power wrestlers. Like a lot of the divisions in the UFC have at least one or two of these type of fighters at the top who can really use this skill set in an extreme way. I don't know that strawweight has that, man. And her backstory is incredible. Like she was genuinely one of the best wrestlers in the entire country, the world, before her cancer diagnosis at age 21. And also just like standing next to her, one thing I will add to end this, her size, like her proportions, they're very surprising. Like she is fucking huge for 115 and not like in a muscly sense, more of like a long, like broad build. Like she has very broad shoulders and her arms are insanely big. And I mean, those are long arms that have a lifetime of practice at how to get underneath someone and move them in whatever way she wants them to. I think she's a champion by next year, by this time next year. And I love your call of putting her against Joanna atop the TUF finale. That seems perfect to me. I mean, she's a product of TUF. There's a story there. And like you said, if Joanna's never faced a challenger like this, just in terms of an opponent stylistically, if she beats Tatiana, I think you could make a compelling case for her to be in that conversation again for the title.
The UFC also needs to strap the rocket to her back as far as marketing goes, because, like you said, she's charismatic. She's an Hispanic lady from Southern California. There's a market there for her. It's a big market for the UFC here in SoCal where I'm at, and it's just so obvious to me that she's someone that they could really put a lot of marketing money and power behind. Moving on to the MMA fighting comments from the Empire 91 frequent commenter. Background. Hey gents, what are y'all's backgrounds, alma maters? How'd you get into MMA media? Interests, hobbies outside of the sport other than wrestling? Wrestling, sorry. My apologies. Wrestling. Thanks as always.
I like that he threw the wrestling comment in there for you so you wouldn't just talk about wrestling.
Just for me. How about you, my friend? Have you watched All In yet?
Well, I knew all the spoilers, so like
What
at that point, I just
are we
never.
doing here?
I know. I'm disappointing to you. I was busy. I was in Dallas. What do you want from me?
Sure, whatever.
I don't know. Backgrounds. I guess I went to ASU. I graduated from ASU. I got an English degree, which I found very quickly was kind of useless. Kind of useless. So I kind of lucked my way into this. I'll very tell this very briefly. It is a long story, but I'll shorten it significantly. When my last year of college, I was just taking a bunch of internships, and I ended up getting a random internship that I wanted really badly with a SB Nation Phoenix Suns blog, Bright Side of the Sun. And I just kind of stuck with SB Nation through there. As at the end of the semester, WEC 53, the last WEC show, came to Phoenix, and they needed someone to cover it. And I was the only one who knew MMA. I was a huge MMA person. I was always watching all the Pride events and everything. And so I jumped at the chance. And that, I don't know, WEC 53 was like one of the best shows of all time, especially probably the best final show for any promotion ever. I mean, if you look up and down that card, it is ridiculous in retrospect. You got like Hen and Barao on the prelims, maybe like the first fight. Like it was Donald Cerrone. Like there was, it was madness. And then of course Pettis, Benson Henderson finished that, and that ends with the Showtime kick. And I come away from that place just being like, holy shit, man! I need to figure out some way to inject this into my veins. Like I just need to be in this arena for the rest of my life. And I kind of just got lucky from there. Oh, Mark, you're muted.
Excuse me?
There you go. You're muted.
All right. Maybe that was a sign. Maybe I should quit here and just move on to the next comment. No, I graduated from St. John's University with a journalism degree, which I also found out is not really worth a whole lot. Just kidding. I worked for a local paper in Queens, where I'm from. I'm from Queens, New York. For a few years, I worked at the New York. I actually started I had my own website with some partners after I worked at a local paper in Queens covering high school sports in New York. It was called FiveBoroughSports.com. And shout out to my boys, Joe, Zach, and Dylan, who I started that website with. My friend Joe, who works at the New York Post now, is getting married on Sunday. I'm going out to New York for his wedding. So shout out to him and Melissa, who are getting married.
Oh, congrats. Congrats. Was that the Nashville bachelor party?
That was the Nashville bachelor party. Yes. And they're causing me to miss PWG this weekend. So that's also a nice little aside. Anyway, yeah. So we had our own website for a bit, for 1 year, and then the New York Post came in and said, you know what, we want you guys to do our high school sports coverage. And I got hired by the New York Post. All of us got hired by the New York Post in 2012, 2011, somewhere in that range. I forget the exact date. That's pretty terrible that I forget that, but got hired by the New York Post, did high schools for a bit, moved up into a spot on the New York Post website covering online sports. I was like one of the online sports editors, like web producers. And at that point, I started an MMA blog because I've always been a huge MMA fan, but I never thought that I could actually get a job writing about MMA. That seemed like a crazy idea to me at the time, because I was covering traditional sports. I covered like the Mets and like the Giants, and I've covered a bunch of like the New York pro sports for the New York Post, and freelancing for Newsday and SNY.TV. I never thought I could work in MMA, but I started an MMA blog at the New York Post in, I guess, 2011, 2012, in that range. And as I was doing MMA stuff and combat sports stuff for the Post, I ran into Mike Chiappetta at a Glory event. I believe this was like early 2013. And Mike Chiappetta met Mike, and he was like, you know, we could use some people maybe who live in New York for the MMA beat. And he was like, would you be interested in coming on the MMA beat one day? I'm like, yeah, obviously. I've been watching that show since it first started. You know, I was a huge fan of MMAfighting.com. And a few months later, I got an email from Ariel, who I really hadn't even met at that point. I think I met him at UFC 159, which was Jones versus Son. And I think I met Ariel for the first time. And I was on the beat. And then that kind of got like my, you know what, I want to do this full time. Ended up working for FoxSports.com for about a year. And now here I am at MMA Fighting. So that was my progression through the years.
Excellent. Well, hey, let's we're hitting the last third of the show, so let's go to Twitter because we have a ton of Twitter questions. Thank you guys so much for all these great Twitter questions. So we're gonna try to hit as many as we can in rapid fire fashion, as much as we can. So let's start from Strike MX, who writes, so it looks like Jose Aldo is going to go up to lightweight finally. And that was reported by Owen Garamay Cruz. Tremendous work. If you want to read that, it's an interesting Aldo interview. He writes, I'm super excited. How do you like his chances there? He'd have a speed advantage and a size reach disadvantage. Mark, Jose Aldo lightweight finally seems like it's happening. What do you think?
I'll believe it when I see it. I still don't know how likely that will be. I'm all for it. I've been saying this for years that he should go up in weight. I think we've even spoken about it on the show. I think he'd be great at lightweight. I mean, if you just look at how fighters have done since moving up in weight, and the perfect example could be a Dustin Poirier, who was at 145, moved up to 55, and has just been on an absolute tear at lightweight. I think that you could see the same thing from Aldo, and he may have a little bit of, he's not the tallest guy, so he may have a little bit of a reach disadvantage. He may have a little bit of a height disadvantage, but I think he will not only bring his power to 145 with him, but I think he could actually have more power at 55. Look at Dustin Poirier. I mean, Dustin Poirier is a bigger man. He's able to put on muscle. He's able to fill out and not have to worry about dieting down and losing muscle throughout training camp. So I think a bigger, faster, more powerful Aldo, better KO power Aldo could be in the offing at 155 if it goes that way. But I'm still not sure. I still feel like 145 is Aldo's division, and I think he still has a path there depending on what happens in the next few months. But I would be very, very much down for an Aldo lightweight run.
I love it, man. In Guillermo's report, Aldo was saying that the UFC tried to book him versus Donald Cerrone at 115 or 155. God damn, I'm so mad now that we didn't get that fight. I've never even considered that as a potential fight in my head. And
I wish I never knew that was a thing, because now that's all I want.
It's all I
wish
want.
I didn't know that.
I can't stop thinking about that fight now. It is such a bizarre matchup that I would love to see. I initially, just right off the top, I love Aldo going to 155. He said that that's what he wants to do unless he gets a title shot at 145. Who knows Max Holloway's situation? Maybe Aldo could get an interim title shot at 145. But otherwise, it seems like he wants to go to lightweight. My only worry is that I wonder if it's too late, because he has done a lot of damage to his body just over the years of making what he has admittedly often said is a insanely difficult weight cut. And at some point, your body, it just takes a toll on your body. I hope we haven't reached that point yet for him. His last fight against Jeremy Stephens showed a lot of promise, I guess, I guess suggesting to me that we haven't reached that point. He took a lot of shots from Jeremy Stephens. His chin wasn't compromised. He stood in the fight, stood in the pocket, and knocked him out with one of the crazier knockouts of the year. I love him at 55. I think if he doesn't have to deal with that weight cut, I'll be interested in how he's going to actually be affected on fight night. I feel like he'll be faster, more energy. And again, I think his chin would be better at 155 as well if you're not depriving your brain with that water from your brain. And there are just so many damn good matchups I would like to see at 155. Also, I think he's keeping the option open of a Conor rematch. You know he wants that at some point. I don't think he'll ever get it, but I think 155 is the only way he could potentially even come close to getting it. And so, like you said, the blueprint is out there, right? Dustin Poirier, Kelvin Gastelum, Robert Whittaker, Anthony Johnson, Dan Hooker. You could just sit here and name names all day long of people who have moved up in weight class and just found a better quality of life, better, situation for their fighting, just everything. You're coming into fight night at a better place. I love that matchup. And I love that news that he's going to do this. And I guess that leads into our next question. It's an excellent segue into our next question coming from the Honest Realtor on Twitter, who asks,
Ally Quinta is asking us questions.
Oh, I like that. He asks, what is next for Darren Till? Who is next? And in my opinion, a move up to the middleweight division is next for Darren Till. Do you agree?
I think it should be, but I don't know as much now. I feel just listening to Darren Till talk after the loss to Woodley, I feel like he may not be done at 170. And it seemed like his weight cut wasn't that awful this time around. according to what him and his nutritionist said last week. Personally, yes, I would like to see him go to 170. I think that
185.
Sorry, yeah, move away from 170 and go to 185. I think that is again for the same reasons. I think that a training camp where Darren Till does not have to worry about depleting his body and eating very little food and not getting enough of a calorie intake for weeks at a time is a more dangerous, is a stronger, is a better Darren Till. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He loses a little bit as far as height goes, as far as size goes. I don't know if he loses much in power, but I would like to see him go to middleweight, and I would like to see him fight someone like maybe Uriah Hall, someone who's in that, maybe not quite ranked or maybe in the top 15, toward the bottom of that. At 170, look, I mean, I don't know what his future would be. It would be a tough sell to have him fight Woodley again anytime soon. It would be a long road back. As long as Woodley is champion, it would be a long road back for Till. But he's marketable enough to do that, of course. I wouldn't say it's crazy if he wins 2 or 3 more fights. But middleweight, you get a couple wins at middleweight. That Whitaker fight is real interesting. Any one of those fights. It isn't like the guys at the top of that division, like the Whitakers and Gastelums, are these massive behemoths. Till is bigger than
welterweights. They're former welterweights.
Exactly. Till is taller than both those guys, bigger than both those guys. So he wouldn't be giving up much in that sense. So I'd be down for that. And I think that his future ultimately is that weight class. He's 25 and he's not gonna get any smaller. Woodley said at a media launch a few weeks ago in LA that when he hit 26 years old, everything, like physiologically, his body changed. He just became just thicker, just like more thickly built. It was hard for him to lose the weight. And I think that Till is kind of going through something similar right now. And I think that ultimately 185 is the future for him.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And I think one key point that you said is the basis for where I'm coming from. It's going to take him a long time to get back to that point, to where he is challenging for a title again. The way that Saturday went down was so one-sided and such a lopsided showing that I don't think anyone's clamoring to see Woodley Till 2 or anything like that. I think it would take Darren Till at least 2 or 3 really high-quality wins to even get back into that title conversation. And at that point, we're looking at a year, 2 years down the line, multiple times having to make this cut. Like, let's take them at their word and say that this was an easier cut than most. The dude still looked like Skeletor out there, like when he was weighing in at the official weigh-ins. Like it is he is very much a Conor McGregor type of situation where if you remember when Conor was weighing in at 145, sure, he made the weight. He never missed it, but he looked like death out there. Like he was so sucked in. He didn't look like the same person. Darren Till is very much in that same situation where he just doesn't look like the same person the Friday before the fight, which is just ultimately not a good sign. I think he is young enough. He's 25, like we said, to where he can really grow into that frame, and he could pack on muscle, and it could be a situation like we have looked at in the past with maybe like Anthony Johnson or something, where once he becomes like this thickly built guy who has fully matured into his body, we look back and wonder how he made that weight to begin with. I think that ultimately there's no point in him. I know he really had his heart set on becoming a 170-pound champion, but there's no point in killing himself for multiple years at this point in his mid-20s and causing lasting damage to his body just to try to get back to the point he was already at. I think 185, like you said, there's a path there where if you give him a Uriah Hall type of, top 15, top 10 type of fighter, and he does well against that, I'm sure the UFC loves him. Dana White seems to love him. They could fast track him into a top 7, top 5 matchup very quickly, and he could be fighting for the middleweight title by, who knows, this time next year, considering how things look. So I think that's the very obvious path he should take.
Would love to see Till versus Israel Adesanya, by the way.
Oh my goodness, man.
Damn good.
That would be fascinating. And the lead up to that would be really great.
Moving on to back to the Twitter from Diego Golo Thomas.
Oh, I like this question. I saw this one too.
Which pair of MMA fighters would you rather see in a reality show together? A, Sage Northcutt and Uriah Faber. B, Mike Perry and Diego Sanchez. C, Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz.
So I'm going to cheat and not give any of those answers. I'm gonna give my own answer. I would like to see.
What are you doing?
This is my game. I'm gonna make my own rules.
It's a multiple choice question, Sean.
It's my game. I'm gonna make my own rules, and I am going with B, Platinum Perry, and A, Sage Northcutt. Those are the two. That's the pairing. That's the pairing. I need to see those two just walk around the world and interact because I think it would be fascinating.
I mean, I like that idea. I actually, if we're gonna stray from what Diego is asking us to do, I would like to see the Tyron Woodley Sage Northcutt reality show because from last year when Woodley introduced Sage Northcutt to actually putting salt and pepper on chicken before eating it. That was like mind blowing. Like I need to see more of this. Like please give me more of these two interacting. And what didn't Woodley take Sage to see like a movie, and Sage was like, wow, that really illuminated me to how, you know, African Americans are treated in the country. Like it was just amazing. It's amazing stuff. I really want to see the Woodley Sage reality show. But if you're giving me these choices, Diego, I would probably have to say Nick and Nate. I mean, the thing is that they're not really together. They're not really together all that much. Nick is off in Las Vegas, having fun, doing his thing, going to Hakkasan 8 nights a week. And Nate Diaz is training kids in the Bay Area and Stockton and doing his training and doing his thing, coming to LA every once in a while. But I would choose the Diaz brothers are just there's no one like those guys. Like they're two of a kind. They're each one of a kind, and together they're two of a kind.
See, the Diaz brothers would be good, but you would have to like whoever's editing that. I don't envy them because they would probably have to film for like a week, and then the super cut down of like the best 30 minutes of that week would be incredible. But then there would be so much dead footage where they're just not doing anything or they're bullshitting around, and you can't understand really what they're talking about, going off on veering on all these different tangents.
That's what I need, though. That's what I want. I want unintelligible conversation. I want to like look at it like what, because I think there's like a deeper meaning in those monologues that Nick has, especially. I think like there's like some kind of like metaphysical.
Sure.
I don't even know. There's something there though. It's deep.
Saying.
It's deep. We're not even deep enough to understand that stuff. Like that's just he's operating at a deeper level than any of us.
I mean, we just go outside after the show's over, take like 6 bong rips, and then maybe we'll get close.
Should we do that actually before the show next week?
I think the show would probably suffer for it, but we could try it if you wanted to. Also, I'm just saying the Platinum Perry, Sage Northcutt pairing, that needs to happen in some capacity because those two are so vastly different. I just want to see their conversation because I think Platinum Perry would be fascinated with Sage Northcutt, and I think the opposite would be true as well.
Honestly, Mike Perry and like anyone on the roster would be fascinating. Him and Darren Till, like that dynamic is so hilarious. Like you want to go spar. Darren Till thinks he wants to go to a spa, says yes anyway. Like I mean, Mike Perry is a special guy.
Hey, let's keep going on Twitter. The next one's coming from Devin, who writes, "Do you think Tyron Woodley is overlooking Colby Covington and will take him lightly? Dean Thomas implied this week on the MMAR that Colby was an easy matchup. Do you think, Mark, that Woodley is overlooking Colby here?"
No, I don't think Tyron Woodley is the kind of guy to overlook really anyone. I think he may be saying that stuff publicly, but I don't think if that fight is booked and Woodley has a training camp to prepare, I think he's going to prepare meticulously the same way he did against Hill, the same way he did against Wonderboy, the same way he did against Damian Maia. I don't think he would overlook Covington. I think that maybe he feels like stylistically it is a bit of an easier matchup because Covington is a wrestler. Woodley is a wrestler. Woodley is obviously a extremely decorated wrestler. We've seen what he can do on the ground, and Covington he's not a big knockout guy. He's not like a karate guy like Wonderboy. He doesn't have the best jiu-jitsu like in MMA history like Maia. So I think for that reason, maybe he's saying he's not as tough as some of the other guys he's fought. But if it comes down to it and that fight gets made, I think Woodley will dissect Covington and come up with a game plan the way he's done all of his opponents.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's a game planner through and through. Like he's not going to take anybody lightly. He could fight me and you tomorrow, and I don't feel like he's be taking us lightly. Like that's just not who he is. I think publicly he's going to say that a lot in the lead up to this fight, just because he doesn't want to give Colby Covington an ounce of credit, considering where they're coming from and everything that's going on between them. But yeah, I would be stunned if both he and Dean were taking Colby lightly in any sense of the word. That's not who they are. Their fight IQ combined as a team is probably the highest or some of the highest in the entire sport.
Also, do you think Tyron Woodley wants to lose to Colby Covington? Are you crazy? Are you crazy? No, he's going to do everything in his power to make sure he's 1,000% prepared for that fight. There is no way that guy wants to lose to Colby Covington. Could you imagine? I mean, no one would ever hear the end of it if Woodley lost to Covington. So yes, he will definitely not take him lightly.
I agree with you 100% on that point. Let's keep moving from some Twitter questions, and we'll keep with the subject of Tyron Woodley. This one's coming from Ricky O'Cumber. I'm going to go with that. Who asks, Tyron Woodley, 2 fights left.
Cucumber.
It says O'Cumber.
Ricky Cucumber.
Is that a Q?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sick. I'm doing the best I can. What do you want from me? He says Tyron Woodley has 2 fights left at 170. Colby and Usman. Is he the greatest at 170 if he beats those two? Would he be the welterweight GOAT, essentially, he's asking?
I don't think so. I still think it's Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre had, 9 title defenses consecutively. I mean, you had said earlier in the show that you think Georges St-Pierre is the best fighter of all time, period. And I think that there's still a long ways to go for him not to be considered the best welterweight of all time. Now, it's hard to say where Woodley stands where we're at now. Obviously, I think he's either 2 or 3. Of course, Matt Hughes would be the other person in that conversation. We don't know what the landscape would be like if he goes and he beats Covington and Usman. Maybe those guys will be considered tough. I mean, they're obviously very tough opponents. There's no doubt about it. But it's hard to compare eras, if you know what I'm saying. It's hard to compare the guys that Georges St-Pierre fought and beat compared to the guys that Woodley fought and beat. So I think we'd have to see what happens, how he beats them. If he goes and knocks both those guys out in a minute, then possibly you can make that comparison. But I think that St-Pierre's body of work and the longevity is really what makes him stand apart. And the consistency, man, if you had to describe GSP with one word, consistency would be the word. And I think that kind of stands up above everything else right now.
Yeah, I think one thing that's always said about George that sticks with me always is he never lost to anybody who he didn't beat. Like, he avenged all of his losses ultimately. So I agree with you. I think if Tyron goes out and, hey, let's say he knocks out Colby and Usman or submits him in a round, like, then maybe we can start having that discussion. Like, it could be a real discussion. But I think the one he'll ultimately need to get back before anybody will ever even put him in that number 1 place is a fight against Rory. I think if he ever gets that rematch against Rory and can win that fight, especially in a convincing fashion, say that's his next 3. Colby, Usman, then Rory. Rory comes back. Then you can really, really put him in that conversation, man. I think then you have a definitive way to throw him in there. But I feel like he's still got a little bit of work left before that.
I have a question for you. Not where does Woodley stand as far as welterweights go, but right now, where is Woodley on your pound-for-pound rankings?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
I think he's got to be up there.
I mean, he's definitely top 5, right?
Has to be, right? I mean, has to be.
So let's go through it real quick. You got, in some order, this is no order, just throwing out the ones that would be up there. Daniel Cormier.
I think DC is right now. I don't think you can say anyone is above him as far as pound for pound goes.
Two division champion. Yeah.
Sure.
Who else you throwing in there? Khabib?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, if you look at the UFC's official list, it's DC, McGregor, Dillashaw, Holloway, and GSP.
Okay. I mean, DC, GSP, and Dillashaw feel like they should be up there. I don't know about McGregor right now. He hasn't fought in like 2 years. And what was the other one? Holloway too. Yeah, I mean, you could throw him in that top 5. I think that feels like a nice top 5 with those 4 and then Woodley.
Woodley has Holloway still has that long winning streak, of course, but Woodley is more accomplished as far as title defenses go. He's got the one against Thompson. I had this conversation the other night, actually.
He didn't defend it. He retained it.
Right. Like that's a weird little thing, right? Is a draw against Thompson. So is that a title defense? I don't think it counts as a title defense, right? Because it's like it's a draw. He didn't win the fight, so the title stays with him, but it isn't like he successfully defended it, right? Is that? I mean, it's a weird thing.
I don't know how it gets counted in actuality, but just like technically, he retained the title. He didn't defend it.
Right. It's a weird thing, but I mean that being said, I mean Woodley has more title defenses, I think, than any current champion, right? 3?
Yeah, I mean,
who has more? I mean,
he's the third longest reigning champion currently in the UFC, only behind DC and Nunes.
Right.
And I feel like he's got more title defenses. So yeah.
I mean, I would put him certainly he's top 5 pound for pound now. And not a lot of people have been talking about this, but I do believe, I mean, he deserves that pound for pound nod, not the top spot, of course, but he's definitely in that conversation now. I wouldn't have put him there before the Till fight, but the way he dominated Till, now that consistency word again, like I spoke about with GSP, it's hard to win. It's hard to win as champion as many times as Woodley is now winning. I mean, not many champions do that, so I give him a ton of credit.
Yeah, I agree with you. We are running out of time.
Wikipedia has him credited for 4 defenses, even though I guess they're counting the Thompson one as one. Cormier has 3 defenses of light heavyweight, and Nunes has 3 defenses of women's bantamweight.
There you go. There you go. Well, I think we're running out of time. Do you want to do one more? Do we have one more?
Yeah, let's do one more. Let's do from Travis Ledbetter. Travis Ledbetter asked us a lot of questions this week. Will Montano or de Randamie be considered a worse champion? Montano got the belt at 4-2 from Tough, then delayed her defense until the threat of being stripped, then shows up 20 pounds over on the week of. Or de Randamie fouls home, then refuses to fight the clear number 1 contender.
Ouch. That is a rough question, man.
Way to bring the negativity this week, Travis. Jeez.
Like, for real. Who will be remembered as a worse champion? I don't know. I mean, that I'm not gonna be the arbiter of that. I will say I think both of them are gonna have a hard time escaping from this shadow. I think Nico probably has a better chance of escaping from whatever this kind of maybe fog that has covered her career at this point. It seems like MMA fans are pretty dug in on Germaine de Randamie and how they feel about her. I think Nico at least has some level of sympathy on a certain degree, just maybe because the Instagram thing, finding out through Instagram and her health issues. So I would say that she has a better chance of recovering from this, but that's a rough question.
I'm not going to make a pick between who the worst champion is. That's silly. I think, I mean, for Montano, it's like the fans that have come out and they have come out on social media to blast her, and I don't get the sentiment that, oh, she never intended to fight. Well, she went to the hospital to try to cut weight to fight. Like who if she really didn't want to fight, she could have pushed the fight back past September. She could have said, I'm not ready September, and maybe the UFC would have stripped her, maybe they would have moved on. And then she would have avoided the fight. Then it would have been a de Randamie situation. But she was at fight week. She was in Dallas. She was there all week, did all the media, did the weight cut, and ended up in the hospital with kidney failure. And that doesn't sound to me.
Yeah, she lost money. Like, she lost money preparing for this camp. No one's just purposely losing money with the intention of not fighting.
Lost money and also risked her health. Like, she's not like people saying, oh, she went to the hospital. Like, if something wasn't seriously wrong, the UFC medical team would not have said, hey, listen, you need to go to the hospital. They would have been like, no, you're fine. Come on. Like, cut the weight, hit the scale, miss weight, whatever. I mean, that doesn't happen unless something is very wrong there. I think it's off base. I think that there's a lot. It's a complex issue, certainly, as we touched on earlier, but I just don't get all the venom for Montano. I think it's unfortunate.
I get it. I get it on a certain sense. Like, if I was just a fan, I would 100% understand where the venom's coming from. Just considering the frustration, again, it has been like 10 months basically since this division was created, and we have no movement. And she wasn't the most vocal champion in terms of letting people know what was going on with their life. There was that weird thing with Ariel. So I don't know. I mean, I understand the venom. How do you feel about what I was saying though? Who do you think has a better chance of escaping whatever that kind of like smog that's covering their career right now?
It's so hard to say. I think de Randamie probably, I would say right now, because some time has passed and fans do have a short memory at times, although sometimes things kind of stick, like the TJ Dillashaw snake in the grass thing, like that.
He's
I feel like
embraced
every
that.
time
He's embraced that
still,
from what it is.
he has embraced that. Didn't he get a tattoo of a
Yeah,
snake?
he has a big snake tattoo along his arm. It's great.
You know what? I think that's fantastic. I think if you can embrace, if you can turn it around and just own it, I think that's great. I think what we did is really smart. I think de Randamie right now, but it's a shitty situation. I think on both sides. The Montano thing, and I do get what you're saying about fans being upset. And look, I was upset. I was looking forward to that fight, and I think it would have been a great fight. And I was legitimately curious to see what was going to happen, because we don't know a ton about Montano. We've only seen her on the show, and we've seen her last year against Modafferi. How would she fare against someone who we know is a monster in Shevchenko? So I was super curious, and I still want to see that fight. And yeah, I was bummed, but I just wish fans wouldn't attack fighters the way they do so much on social media. It just seems very. It gives me like, I don't get it. It makes me like weirded out that fans would be so venomous and so hateful toward fighters. Like these are people that we're supposed to be, watching to root for them, right? I mean, why they're going to a cage and fighting for our entertainment, and fans are just brutal on some of these fighters.
I will say, I said this earlier in the show, I think you have to give Nico Valentina's sister that matchup it would be so good right now. I feel like that's the perfect matchup to throw Nico back into this. But hey, that's about it for us. That's about it for all we have today. I can't speak at this point. We have the promo. Do you want to go first, Mark? You want me to go first?
I go first, like, because you always have like these really like deep, like I can't follow your promos because it's always something like really like heartfelt, and I'm just an ass. So I don't know. So I'll go first with my promo.
Mine is definitely not heartfelt this week, if that means anything.
That's fine. I'll still go first. So nice. It goes back to what I want to say. It goes back to what I was saying about Montano, and this is more about Michael Chiesa. We found out, I guess TMZ reported on Monday night, and it was confirmed by multiple outlets, including ours, on Tuesday, that Michael Chiesa is indeed suing Conor McGregor as a result of the bus attack in Brooklyn back at UFC 223 Fight Week at Barclays Center. Of course, it's an infamous story. We all know what happened. McGregor and his buddies from Ireland came to Barclays Center. They stormed the loading dock. They attacked the bus that UFC fighters were on following media day, and McGregor threw a dolly through the bus window. Glass shattered. Glass sprayed on Michael Chiesa's face. He was bloody. He inevitably had to pull out of his UFC 223 fight against Anthony Pettis. So he's suing McGregor. He's suing Barclays Center. Barclays Center is parent company, McGregor Sports and Entertainment, and everyone who was with McGregor who went unnamed in the lawsuit, because we don't know all their names, but he's suing all of them. So the fan response to this was, I would say, 90% negative. Fans really, really came out and were furious at Michael Chiesa for suing McGregor. And my thing is this. I do get it in a sense, because fans don't like fighters getting litigious when they're fighters. They want them to be fighters in the cage. They don't want to see them in the courtroom. And obviously there are tons of Conor McGregor fans who, you could do anything, he could do anything, and you could say anything about him, they will always support McGregor no matter what. But there's no doubt that McGregor was wrong in this situation, right? I don't see any way around that. It was a huge mistake. It was a ridiculous display. He threw a dolly through a bus. It was on video. We all saw it. There's no escaping that, right? There's no painting that away. He got arrested for it. He ultimately, of course, pleaded to a misdemeanor, got community service, not jail time. But he was in the wrong. I don't think there's any way. Even the biggest McGregor fan, I think, has to say he was in the wrong for doing that. And it affected Chiesa. He was going to fight Anthony Pettis. Before he was in the bus, he was there, he was ready to go, he was going to fight. McGregor did that, and it resulted in him not being able to do that fight, not being able to get paid for that fight. And he's saying that it could have also cost him a shot against Nurmagomedov in the main event title fight, because Holloway ended up pulling out and Chiesa was the highest ranked lightweight on the card. If Holloway was gone, he would have slaughtered in. We don't know if that was going to happen, but my take is this: why are we being venomous to Michael Chiesa when he's got a pretty good case? McGregor's actions resulted in him losing money. Now, the stuff about the emotional distress that's in the lawsuit, okay, fine. I understand why. That's mostly just legal jargon and lawyer stuff. But Chiesa was going to fight. He was going to get paid on that date. McGregor came in, threw a dolly through a bus window, injured Chiesa, and Chiesa was no longer able to fight, no longer able to get paid. To me, and I'm no legal scholar, I'm no lawyer, but to me that sounds like a pretty decent case for what it's worth. So I don't understand why fans are so upset about this when Chiesa had a chance to make money. He lost it out because of McGregor. And to me, there's a case there. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to settle or what. But again, I don't understand why fans seem to hate fighters so much. Fans hate fighters. Like, these are the people that you should be rooting for in the cage. I don't get it.
I will add to that. I think because Chiesa missed weight for his next fight, then right afterwards. I think we've talked about this before, but when somebody's cutting weight, like, and they don't say he didn't even have to weigh in because that fight was canceled, that's probably still threw off his weight cut for the next one because he had to turn right back around and get right back into a training camp. So there is more there to it than the story. But I think ultimately, like, you can't police the internet, right? Like, the internet is going to be doing what it wants. The fan base is what it is, man. There's wonderful people and there's crappy people. So,
well, the great people are not the vocal ones, right? But the fans on social media, like, it's just when you write an article and you see like the comments are 99% negative and like saying some like really awful stuff too, it just makes you think like, what, like, why do people feel like they need to do this? Like, I've never in my life seen something on Twitter and I wanted to write back like in the comments like something just heinous and terrible. I mean, curse words and other just horrible things to say. Like, I've never had that inclination. I don't know what makes people like.
Well, I am
do that, or I don't get it.
I'm sure that the people you are talking about are going to write you some comments and let you know
fine.
How they feel about what you're saying.
That's fine. Someone already asked me on Twitter a few minutes ago while we were doing the show, "Are you gay?" Yes. What is wrong with you people? Get your lives together. Christ.
I didn't expect that. I'm sorry. You surprised me. Okay. So Jesus Christ. So my promo, like I said at the top, I mean, I was in Dallas this past week for UFC 228. I really enjoyed the week. Like, Dallas is one of my favorite cities to travel to for an event. Every time there's a Texas event, I always jump on it just because I enjoy, the state, the people there are so nice. The food's great.
We first met in Dallas.
Yeah, the first time we met.
Is that why it's your favorite place? It's because we first met there?
It gives me fond memories. Actually, like, it's a funny story. The first day we met, like maybe an hour after we met, we were leaving together. We cabbed together back to the hotel, and we saw someone like run their car over the intersection and smash into a stoplight and not stoplight, like a stop sign, just completely take down the entire sign and cause chaos in some Dallas intersection. So that was fun. But I love the people in Dallas. I love the food, everything. It's always an awesome time. But boy, Texas Athletic Commission, man, it is always an adventure with these dudes. It is maybe reliably one of the most reliably bad commissions in the entire country. And they did not disappoint this weekend. Two things stuck out to me the most. One, official weigh-ins. The man reading the scale for the first like 15 minutes of official weigh-ins did not seem to have been briefed on how to read the scale correctly. Our own Esther Lynn, who's obviously taking photos, she's the greatest photographer of all time when it comes to combat sports. She's zooming in on this stuff, so she has an idea. It seemed as though he was reading the scale wrong and counting half pounds as pounds. And it was just a very strange situation. Like, at one point he had to get corrected on how to read the scale because the UFC jumped in. And then that's kind of when things settled from there. But it was just like, okay, that's a great table setter for a fight night. And then it ended up being a great table setter for the next night, which was Saturday, of course. And I saw maybe the worst scorecard I have ever seen in my entire life. I feel like you already know where I'm going with this, guys. If you watched the fight night, you were on Twitter and you kind of followed along. Tatiana Suarez slapped together 3 of the most one-sided rounds I've ever seen in a women's fight. It was a pure, like, the fight ended in the last round via TKO. But if it went to the scorecards, I felt like it was an obvious 30-24 Khabib style, just dominating performance where there was 10-8s all around, and it was just obvious we knew what was going on. Oh, wait, no, there were no 10-8s. There were no 10-8s. Oh, wait, no, there was one 10-8. One judge gave one 10-8. It was Daniel Mathiasen. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Who gave a 10-8 first round to Carla Esparza, the woman with the broken face, probably. He gave her a 10-8. Afterwards, the Texas Commission admitted that was a mistake. He meant to give that 10-8 to Tatiana Suarez. So at least he had good intentions compared to the other judges who just saw all those rounds as 10-8 or 10-9 rounds. Because, let's say the Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson or Derek Lewis Ngannou, which is a fight you are very familiar with. Those rounds are the same rounds as Tatiana Suarez just basically beating Carla Esparza within an inch of her life. We're just going to say those are the same things. Oh my God. It was genuinely maybe the worst scorecard I've ever seen in my entire life. Just all around badness. And if you remember, Texas is the commission with the archaic rules about marijuana, taking away wins from like people like Curtis Blades and Jessica Eye for the slightest hint, where it's like much lower ratio they need than the rest of the country. And they had the bizarre situation with Courtney Casey, where they suspended her on like no logical grounds, accusing her of steroid use, and then had to walk that one back and reverse the suspension. And even then, like after the UFC was clearly publicly like, you guys got this one wrong, you need to apologize. Even then, there was no public statement of apology. No one ever reached out to Courtney to apologize to her for what they did to her career. It's just repeated ridiculousness, man. And now this. So I love Texas. I love going there. I love all the people there. I love that state. My girl is from San Antonio. But get your shit together, Texas Commission. This is ridiculous, man.
You got to call out the judge who did that.
I did. Daniel Mathiasen, but I don't know if I'm saying that right. Matheson? There you go.
And I believe that gentleman judged later on in the card as well.
He did.
That is, he literally got the 2 women confused.
Their names are on their shorts.
There's no excuse. That's your job. How do you get them confused? I don't know. What is worse? What is worse? A judge who is just just not a good judge and maybe blows calls once in a while, or a judge who gets the fighters' names confused and switches up the scorecards? What is worse to you? I don't know.
I have no idea, man. My mind was blown because we get these scorecards after the fights emailed to us. And my mind was blown when I read that scorecard. It was just like, what, 10 8s and the only one is for Carla? Like I don't even understand at words at this point. Like what is life? I don't get it. But hey, that's it. That's it. I don't know. I can't keep ranting on that. That's it for us. This has been another episode of the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. It is always fun. This was a blast. You guys had some great questions this week. Really had fun on this show. But hey, that's it for us. The replay for this will come up immediately on YouTube, later in the day on SoundCloud. And I promise, I know you guys don't even want to hear it and you don't believe me anymore, but we had a meeting yesterday about iTunes and it is happening. Mark's like rubbing his head right now because he's so frustrated, but it is happening. It's in the works this month. It will be there on iTunes and we will get this figured out. In the meantime, Mark, you have any closing thoughts?
I will be in New York next week for the Conor Khabib press conference, and I will be not in this sauna room. I'll be in the New York office of Vox Media somewhere.
Do they have a sauna room there you could be in?
Hopefully internet. I don't care where. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care where it is, as long as the internet is good.
Well, hey, I'm crossing our fingers for that. Same time, same place next week. In the meantime, love you guys. Thank you so much once again. This has been the A-Side Live Chat Podcast, and we will see you next Wednesday.